Hello there, I'm Rafael de Furia, back at it again on another Friday night, and this week I am back for another update. This week I was hoping that I wouldn't have to upload another update, but I've been getting a lot more questions from you guys about what's going on here, so I felt as though that it would be appropriate to do so this week. I was very much hoping to be able to put up a different kind of video this week, but things just lately have been seeming to move almost a little bit faster and faster. But before we get too much deeper into this video, if you would like to see more content like this about moving to Italy, Italian dual citizenship, living life abroad, and updates from Italy, be sure that you are subscribed to this channel with the notification bell turned on. If you could also share this video with your friends and give this video a like, that would be greatly appreciated because it does very much help out the channel. So let's start out with Wednesday of this week. There was a sharp rise in cases with 15,199 new cases and 127 deaths. And Thursday, which is the day that I'm recording this video, there were 16,079 new cases in the past 24 hours. However, there had been roughly about 7,500 fewer swabs than the day before. So even though there was less testing, the numbers still were increasing. And as of today, Thursday, the time of this recording, the current number stands at 36,968, with the total of recoveries at 456,726. Only as of a few weeks ago, we were getting about 2,000 in the space of about 24 hours. But again, the thing that I think is interesting about all of this is that there does seem to be a lot more testing done now than there was earlier this year. So I can't help but wonder if there's any connection there, if because there is so much more testing that we're seeing so many more cases in comparison to what we were seeing before. But again, this is just one of these things that just as time goes on, I guess we'll figure out what is going on. But the main uptick in cases really seems to be around the Lombardy region, Lazio, as well as Campania. These are the regions where you find Milan, Rome, and Naples. And the way that they've been trying to combat this in those areas is they actually have introduced curfews. Each place seems to have done it a little bit differently, and actually one of the curfews only starts tonight, the night I'm recording this, and the other one is going to be starting tomorrow, the day that this video actually goes live on YouTube. And for example, in Lombardy, the curfew will come into effect at 11 p.m. and run every day until November 13th at 5 a.m. From what I'm understanding, basically the curfew is from 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. just to kind of make it a little bit more plain and simple. But if you go down to Lazio, where you find Rome, the curfews there will be starting on Friday night from midnight. But where I live, this is something that hasn't been put into effect, and the rules seem to be pretty much the same as they have been, not really changing much, where that after a certain time of night at bars and restaurants, there's table service available only, and that everything has to be closed by midnight. And this is actually something that I have seen already starting to directly affect businesses here. I was out and talking to a couple of owners, people that I'm friendly with that have little stores, restaurants, and cafes here in Rovigo, where I live, and they are saying that this is already affecting their business significantly. The places that I'm sure have been affected the most would be bars, for example, where people could be out until, say, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I know of one bar here that gets the busiest at, say, about 11 o'clock, midnight or so, and can be very busy until about 3 a.m. There's even one restaurant here that I guess you would call it a restaurant of sorts. It's kind of, I guess, maybe what you might call a cafe in the United States, but not necessarily what you would... Anyway, the terminology changes a little bit depending on where you are, and they are open, I believe, 23 hours a day, or at least they had been open 23 hours a day. So that's something where during certain periods it's not possible for them to continue the same way and get the same type of income that they had been getting previously. And so even my friends and I were out a couple of days ago, and we just happened to be very hungry at about, say, 11 o'clock at night, and we were saying, okay, let's go get a snack at this one place that we all know that we really like. We went in. I happened to be friendly with the owners there. They said, look, the thing is, we're happy to serve you. Like, we're not closed yet, but we have to close at midnight. And so I said, no, look, no problem. Like, we'll eat really quickly. Don't worry about it. I mean, I eat quickly anyway. That's one American habit that I haven't quite gotten rid of, is eating quickly. So for me, not a big deal. For my friends, we made it work, and we had plenty of time to spare. But talking to locals here, and especially business owners, I keep hearing some of the same jokes over and over again about how if these are the rules and like places have to be closed by midnight, I keep hearing this joke about that this what we're going through is only nocturnal. You can only be affected by it after 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. I mean, I get the joke, and I get it also comes from a place of frustration. I mean, we're all frustrated with this. This is a rough time that we're all going through. But getting back to the curfews, in some of these places where they have the curfews in place, they are now actually requiring people to actually have the self-certification forms that the government was requiring earlier this year. At this point now, as you saw in the latter part of the lockdown, that the police are now going to be carrying these forms with them. But something that we did see in the earlier part of the lockdown was that if you didn't carry it with you, some places were actually fining people for not having them. So that's something I am curious to see if those fines are still in place and how that's really being carried out. I know in some parts of the country, they have been fining people for not wearing masks or going out and putting other people at risk in that way. But as far as not carrying the self-certification form, that's something that I have not been hearing about, at least since the earlier part of the lockdown earlier this year, when we actually were in lockdown. Because at this point in time, the majority of the country is not under lockdown. There was just that 1-2 week lockdown that I mentioned in my video. I believe it was 2 weeks ago now. So theoretically, they should be coming out of their lockdown. Anyway, moving on. Like I mentioned last week, here in my city where I live, Rovigo, in the Veneto region, not so far from Venice, about, say, like just over an hour from my city to my small little city to Venice. They had canceled the fair that they have here in Rovigo every year, that's been going on for hundreds of years, that it's basically a county fair. What I talked about last week, where it's a lot of fun. It's something really a wonderful time. But this week, it has been announced that in Alto Adige and Trentino, that the Christmas markets there will be canceled this year. Again, this is something else that I'm personally very disappointed about, because after this whole year, I was thinking, okay, maybe it'll be a special treat. I'll take myself up there, because that's one thing about living in Alto Adige that I really do miss. They have some really wonderful Christmas markets that are really festive and wonderful. I'll include a link up in the corner of the video to hopefully at least one video. If I can put a link to a playlist, I'll link to a playlist of videos, just because it really gives you that wonderful winter kind of feeling, that very festive Christmas spirit that I know I personally enjoy very much. But this year it has been canceled, and this is something that I do actually find a little bit interesting, because in the legislation that was put through recently, they've only banned to have fairs and like local festivals, but they didn't technically ban having Christmas markets. Yes, okay, you can extend that to the idea of a market and a Christmas market. So yes, it does make sense that they did close these things. It's really too bad that they felt it was necessary to do it. But at the same time, I can't help but think it's almost too bad maybe to not be able to have a limit on the amount of people that enter into the market, and just have some sort of system in place to have the idea of the amount of people going in and coming out. Because at a lot of the markets, there's only a few entry points to begin with anyway. But that's neither here nor there. I do understand why these restrictions have been put in place, because these markets do happen to attract a lot of people from not only just all over Italy, but even people from Austria and even Germany. I even met a couple French people there. Like, it's not just people from this area that are attracted to come and see this festive time. It's a big event. But moving on to more from Italy's premier, Giuseppe Conte, Coming from his office recently, and even from his mouth, it seemed as though there was a lot of talk about trying to avoid lockdowns and trying to really make that happen so that we wouldn't have to worry about these things. However, on the 22nd, today, Thursday, the day that I'm recording this, the tone almost is seeming to change ever so slightly. And I will say that I am a bit concerned, because even though it had been mentioned before, it was now mentioned again in a slightly different manner about how that the government is now prepared for if a situation does arise. Because previously there had been a lot of repetition about avoiding lockdowns and really making sure that one wouldn't happen. But now it's something that I personally am curious to see how things move forward in the next few days, in the next week, the tone of what's being said. Mr. Conte at this point is still not in favor of the closure of schools, but something that is happening in the country is that high schools are not being allowed to open before 9 a.m. in hopes of combating the traffic that would happen in the mornings, because so many students actually take the public buses here. There's not necessarily so much of a private bus system here in Italy for schools. But on that same note of trying to keep the spread down on public transportation, in Rome, they are contracting private buses to be able to become part of their system, at least for the time being, so that they can make the buses less crowded. Because if you've been on a bus in Rome, you'll know that, or really any city in the world, you'll know that buses can get quite crowded. But as just a regular guy, seeing all of this happening in the news and seeing all of these curfews and the self-certification letters being required again in some places, and what's been happening and how much things seem to have sped up in the updates and what's going on with the situation and the jump and spike in cases, unfortunately, I can't say that I personally have the best outlook on what may be coming up over the next few weeks, even potentially few days. But in the last story of this week, in EU news related to Italy, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, I hope that I'm saying that right, said that they are doing all that they can to save jobs, and that they have come up with a new instrument/investment initiative called SURE, the temporary support to mitigate unemployment risks and emergency. Interesting way to take an acronym from a sentence, but rather than make fun of an acronym, getting back to what's going on, at this point, the Commission has proposed to grant financial support at a figure of about 87.8 billion to 17 member states, with Italy marked down for 27.4 billion euros. The SURE is available to member states that need the financial means to fight the economic impact and outbreak, and can provide financial assistance of up to 100 billion in the form of loans from the EU for the preservation of employment. And again, I'm reading because there's some parts that I just want to make sure that I get right, rather than talk off the top of my head like I normally do. But this part that it says here, for the preservation of employment, that's something that I can't help but wondering about the stipulations and definitions that surround that point. Because earlier this year, we not only saw people losing their jobs because businesses were failing, but for the simple fact that people were unable to get to work to begin with. So of course, it's one thing to be able to financially protect businesses and people's jobs from a financial standpoint, but what's the situation going to look like if there were to be another lockdown, if there were to be something else to build up, and if people aren't able to get to work anymore? I can't help but wonder if this may cover anything in that area, where if people just can't work, is this a safety net for them, or is there going to be any kind of safety net put into place? But again, of course, this is something that we're just going to have to see as it progresses. Hopefully next week we have some better news, or at least something positive to talk about. Because yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do these updates, but of course I'd love to get back into talking about more of the stuff that a lot of you have subscribed for. Although it does seem as though that you guys have been having a positive response to these updates. So for the time being, I will at least continue with these. I'm debating on whether a second video per week is something that I need to start doing again. That's something that I had done in the past, but if it's going to continue on for a while, that there's going to be a lot of updates to talk about. This is something that I do have in the back of my mind. But for now, while I'm still in the middle of this move and finishing up everything that has to do with this, for the time being, there will just be the one Friday night video per week. But of course, as always, a huge thank you to those of you who are helping to make these videos possible and to help this project to be able to continue through Patreon. Your help and assistance to let this project keep going is truly appreciated. So thank you very much. And thank you so much to those of you who are also subscribed and have liked these videos and have shared these videos with your friends. It is greatly appreciated because it really does help out the channel a lot. Of course, as always, I'm Rafael de Furia, and I will see you all next time. Later.